Alright, so the sixth topic that we're going to cover is why taxpayers become tax evaders. Several researchers have studied how people go from a taxpayer to a tax evader, and all of them have found very similar data to conclude that it is a process and it does not happen overnight. The questions that we must ask ourselves are these. Are these positions that these tax evaders hold, are they reasonable? And if the research in the process of people becoming tax evaders is logical, then is it possible that any person in similar circumstances would also become a tax evader? Secondly, another question to ponder is, would a different tax system, such as do no harm, change the reasoning and desire of tax evaders to cheat on their taxes? Excuse me. First study. According to ACC700 and Salim, there are three stages that lead a taxpayer to seek tax evasion and to justify it morally. The first is the perception of the taxpayer that the government is evil. If the taxpayer views the government as corrupt and evil, then tax evasion is justified in their eyes, and the justification of tax evasion is the first step. However, if the government is using tax dollars effectively to aid people, and if the public perceives the government as being good and just, then they are less likely to evade taxes. The second step is the burden that taxes are upon the taxpayer. We talked about earlier taxes, really hurting the poor, making it hard to maintain a vehicle, making it hard to buy clothes because they can buy one piece of clothing for $5 plus taxes at $6. Well, they can't buy the dollar pair of socks because of the taxes on the socks. Put the socks above $1, so they only have $6. So what do they get? Socks or pants? So it hurts the poor. So if they perceive the government as evil, if the taxes place an undue burden upon the person, maybe the taxes are too high and the person struggles to pay their taxes or to pay their monthly bills because of the taxes. So when taxes place a financial hardship on somebody, they advance to stage 3. Stage 3 is the reference group and the consequences of tax evasion. If everybody in the community of the taxpayer, soon to be tax evader, is for tax evasion, then they are going to be more likely to evade taxes. However, if the people within the community are against tax evasion, it will slow down their process of transforming into a tax evader. So it's the community. So stage 3 is the reference groups that the people attach themselves to, the community, and the penalties for tax evasion, which you could also probably add the likelihood of getting caught into that as well. Lambarton and Nava and Norton found similar results, and this is in their 2018 work in page 310. So Asfar and Salim was from page 132 in their 2023 work. Lambarton and his associates, 2018, page 310. The first step is very similar to the second step of Salim, or excuse me, Asfar and Salim's. The first step in Lambarton and his associates is the taxpayer psychologically discovering the lack of benefit from the government compared to the amount of money that he is paying. Again, this is the cost-benefit ratio, morality code of ethics, where the taxpayer sees their money and says, you know what, all the taxes I'm paying, the hundreds of thousands of dollars in taxes, I'm not really getting the benefit from the government that I should be. Therefore, they have no desire to pay taxes. So, step 1 is having a negative view of the government and the use of their tax dollars. Second step of the argument is the lack of control or input on how the tax dollars were spent. Researchers found that those who had a positive view of the use of their tax dollars by the government were noticeably more compliant with tax laws and less willing to cheat on their taxes. This study conducted showed that a lot of people who had a say in the tax dollars, there was an experiment done, and the people that had a say in how the tax dollars were spent were way more compliant and were way more willing to give money for taxes willingly, as opposed to those who did not have a say. People who the study conducted by the researchers conclude that non-compliance comes about due to a perception in the misuse of tax dollars and a lack of ability to change the misuse of the money, a lack of ability of being able to control how the money was spent. And that is from Lombardi and his associates, page 310 through 312, as well as 322 through 323. Seventh step. So the seventh study, the seventh finding that we have is kind of goes along with this, which is the perception of the government affects tax compliance. Several researchers have found that the effect of the government, the effect of the perception of people of the government directly affects their willingness to comply with taxation. A study of Cizenko from his 2024 study, pages 8 and 9, he concluded that the morality of taxation is linked to trust in the government and its enforcing bodies. The more one trusts his government, the more that person is willing to comply with tax laws and is actively engaged in his community. On the other hand, the less that one trusts his government and the less that he's willing to pay, the less that he trusts his government, it means the less that he's willing to pay in taxes, and the more that he considers tax fraud justifiable. The solution to increase tax support, then, according to this study, is to increase trust in the government and its enforcing bodies, such as the police and military. And this is from Cizenko's 2024 work, pages 8 through 10. McGee, Yoon, and Lee concur with the perception theory, where the perception of the taxpayer of his government shapes his tax compliance. Their research led them to conclude that the morality of paying taxes is dependent on the government and that is dependent on the government that the payees are under. And this is from their 2015 work, pages 61 through 69. From page 161 through 169. For example, governments that have many human rights abuses and are corrupt or are seen by their citizens as such and are seen by their citizens as not deserving their tax dollars, are these people, these citizens of that government, deem tax evasion as justifiable and are way more willing to engage in tax evasion. And that was based on a acute study that they did in specifically dealing with Yemen. And they also did studies on a few other countries.